The first time I saw him again, it was not his face I recognized. It was his laugh. That same lazy, careless laugh that used to echo across my father's cassava field when we were young and foolish and certain the world owed us happiness. Except now that laugh was wrapped in silk, sitting inside a car that cost more than every house in our village combined. And it was not aimed at me, it was aimed at her, the woman on his arm, the one with skin like polished mahogany and a neck dripping with gold. The one the whole crowd at the market had gathered to admire, like she was royalty descending from the clouds. I stood there with a basket of tomatoes balanced on my head, sweat running down my back from the afternoon sun, and I watched Kelechi Eze, the boy who once knelt in the red dirt of my father's farm and swore before God and the ancestors that he would return for me, step out of that car like a king returning to a kingdom that had forgotten to wait for him. He did not see me, or maybe he did and simply chose not to. Before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you about the wife, the wealth, the betrayal that nearly broke my spirit into pieces too small to gather again, let me take you back. Not to the beginning, no, because beginnings are boring, and this story does not deserve boredom. Let me take you to the moment everything cracked open. The moment I understood that the boy I loved was never entirely who I thought he was, and neither, I would soon learn, was I. My name is Amara. I was born in a village called Umoyibo, tucked between palm trees and red hills, where the rain came when it wanted, and the harvest determined whether we ate rice or gari that season. My father, Papa Nnamdi, was a farmer, with hands like tree bark and a heart softer than the yam pottage my mother used to make on Sunday evenings. We were poor, not the kind of poor that makes for pity in stories, but the real kind, the kind where you learn to stretch one meal into two and pretend you are not hungry when your younger siblings are watching. Kelechi's family was poorer than mine. That surprises people when I tell them, because by the time this story reaches its second act, he will be a billionaire, wrapped in a name too grand for the boy who used to steal guavas from Mama Ngozi's tree and share them with me under the mango tree behind the church. But when we were young, Kelechi's mother took in laundry for the wealthier families in the next town, and his father, a quiet, broken man named Obiora, worked odd jobs that never seemed to add up to enough. Kelechi and I grew close not because our families arranged it, but because poverty has a way of binding hearts that comfort never could. We understood hunger the same way. We understood shame the same way. And somewhere between the ages of 15 and 19, understanding turned into something neither of us had a name for, until one evening, under that same mango tree, he took my hand and called it love. I believed him. I want you to remember that detail, because everything that unravels later begins with that single dangerous act of belief. By the time Kelechi turned 22, restlessness had eaten a hole through his chest. He spoke constantly about Lagos, of the money men made in the city, of a life beyond the red dust and the empty stomachs. I did not blame him. I dreamed those same dreams some nights, staring at the tin roof above my sleeping mat, imagining a life where I did not have to calculate how many cups of rice would last until market day. The night before he left, we sat by the stream that separated our village from the forest, and he made me a promise so heavy I still feel its weight sometimes, even now, even after everything. Amara, he said, his voice trembling in a way I had never heard before, I will go and build something, and when I come back, it will be for you. Only you. Wait for me. I did not know that night that I was not the only person he had made a promise to. I did not know that his mother, on her deathbed 2 years later, would call him close and whisper a secret that would reshape the direction of his entire life. A secret involving my own family, so carefully buried that even my father did not fully understand its roots. But I am getting ahead of myself. Suspense, after all, is a slow-burning fire, not an explosion. Let it build. For the first year after Kelechi left Umoyibo, letters came. folded, sweat-stained, carried by bus drivers and traders who passed through Umoibo. He wrote about hardship in Lagos, about sleeping on the floor of an uncle's one-room apartment with 6 other men, about hunger that made our village poverty look like luxury. I wrote back with whatever comfort I could offer: prayers, encouragement, and once, secretly, the money I got from selling my late grandmother's gold beads, the only inheritance I had. I told him it was a gift from God. I never told him where it truly came from. My mother never forgave me for selling those beads. Though she never said so aloud, she simply looked at my empty neck sometimes and sighed, the kind of sigh that carries 1,000 unspoken accusations. If you are enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this goes. By the 2nd year, the letters slowed. By the 3rd year, they stopped entirely. I told myself the city had swallowed him the way it swallowed so many young men, into silence, into struggle, into forgetting. I told myself many things because the alternative, that he had simply chosen not to remember me, was too heavy a stone to carry. My father grew sick during those years, a slow illness that ate at his lungs, the kind country doctors call old age when they do not have the equipment to name it properly. I became the one who worked the farm, who negotiated with traders, who learned to harden my voice so men would not cheat a girl running her father's business. My younger brother, Chidi, was supposed to help, but Chidi had his own secrets, secrets I would not uncover until they nearly destroyed what remained of our family. Then, 7 years after Kelechi left Umoibo with nothing but a bag of clothes and a mouthful of promises, the village awoke to news that spread like wildfire through dry grass. A man named Chief Okonkwo Eze, a name none of us recognized, was building a mansion on the outskirts of town. Word said he owned oil interests in 3 states, hotels in Lagos and Abuja, and a shipping company that moved goods across the ocean. Word said he was worth more money than our entire local government could spend in 10 years. Nobody connected this powerful stranger to the barefoot boy who once ate guavas under the mango tree, except me, the day I saw a photograph in a newspaper a trader had wrapped fish in. The face was older, heavier with wealth and confidence, but the eyes, those eyes had haunted my sleep for 7 years. I nearly dropped the fish in the dirt. Kelechi Eze had become Chief Okonkwo Eze, and he was coming home. I will not pretend my heart did not leap with a foolish, girlish hope. Despite the silence, despite the years, despite my mother's warnings that men who leave villages rarely return with the same hearts they left with, some stubborn part of me still believed in a promise made by a stream under a darkening sky. That hope lasted exactly as long as it took him to step out of that car in the market with a woman on his arm whose beauty seemed engineered rather than born, whose name I would soon learn was Adaeze.
I want to pause here and tell you something important, something I did not understand until much later. Pain does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it walks quietly into a room, sits beside you, and waits for you to notice it is there. That is what happened to me in that market. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply stood very still, the tomatoes balanced on my head, suddenly feeling like the heaviest thing I had ever carried. And I watched the boy who promised me forever walk past me as though I were a stranger. But here is where the story refuses to be simple, where the threads begin to tangle in ways I never expected. 3 days after Kelechi's return, my brother Chidi came to me with a face I had never seen on him before. Pale, sweating, his hands shaking like a man carrying a secret too large for his body. "Amara," he said, "I need to tell you something about Papa and Kelechi's mother." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. According to Chidi, who had overheard our dying mother speaking to a village elder years ago, a conversation he was too young to fully understand at the time, our father, Papa Namdi, had once been in love with Kelechi's mother, long before either of them married, before Papa met my mother, before Kelechi's mother married the quiet, broken Obiora. There had been a child, Chidi said, a child born of that love, given away in secrecy to a distant relative in another state, raised without ever knowing the truth of her origins. I did not want to believe it. I told Chidi he was mistaken, that grief made people imagine things, that our mothers' whispered conversations were nothing more than village gossip mistaken for truth. But some truths refuse to stay buried, no matter how deep the grave you dig for them. 2 weeks later, at a lavish welcome home ceremony Chief Okonkwo Eze threw for the entire village, an event so extravagant it felt almost cruel against the backdrop of our modest homes, I finally came face to face with Adaeze, his high-class wife, the woman whose elegance made the rest of us feel like shadows in our own village. And when she smiled at me, extending a manicured hand in polite greeting, I saw it. The shape of her eyes, the particular curve of her jaw, the same features I saw every morning in my father's aging face. If you are keeping a mental list of shocking family secrets, my friend, buckle up, because this one nearly broke me in half. Adaeze was not simply Kelechi's wife. Adaeze I would come to learn through weeks of careful, painful investigation, through cornering an old midwife who still lived on the edge of the village, through finally forcing my father to speak the truth he had buried for 30 years, was my half-sister. The child born of my father's forgotten first love, given away, raised in the city under a different name, unaware for her entire life that the man she called father was not her blood, and unaware that the poor farming family in Umoibo carried her true bloodline. Kelechi had married my sister. I do not know even now whether that was fate laughing cruelly at me or something darker, a deliberate manipulation orchestrated by people whose motives ran deeper than love or coincidence. Because here is the twist that changed everything I thought I understood about this story. Adaeze knew. She had known for over a year. When I confronted her, my hands trembling, my voice barely holding steady, expecting shock, expecting denial, expecting the kind of confusion that comes from learning a life-altering secret for the first time, I found instead a woman who met my eyes with a strange, sorrowful calm. "I have known since before the wedding, Amara," she told me, her voice quiet in the grand sitting room of a mansion that suddenly felt more like a cage than a palace. "I know who my father is. I know about you. I know about the promise Kelechi made you by that stream." The room seemed to spin. "Then why?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Did you marry him? Why did you let him forget me, knowing what you knew?" And this is where the story takes its cruelest turn, the one I never saw coming, despite every warning sign I had ignored along the way. "Because, Amara, I did not choose him for love," Adaeze said, tears finally slipping down her carefully powdered face. "I chose him because Kelechi came to my adoptive family with a business proposal that saved my father, my adoptive father, from bankruptcy and disgrace. I chose him because in my world, marriage is a contract dressed in silk, not a promise whispered by a stream. I did not know when I agreed that the woman he abandoned to build his empire was my own blood sister." I want you to sit with that for a moment, the way I had to sit with it in that gilded sitting room, surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt obscene. Because the deeper truth, the one Adaeze revealed next, trembling, as though the words themselves might shatter her, was that Kelechi's fortune had not been built purely on ambition and hard work as the village believed. It had been built, in part, on land documents that once belonged to my father. Land Kelechi had convinced Papa to sign over years ago before he left for Lagos, under the guise of protecting the family inheritance from corrupt local officials. Land that, unbeknownst to my sick and trusting father, sat atop oil reserves discovered only after Kelechi departed the village. land that became the foundation stone of the empire Chief Okonkwo Eze now stood upon. My father, sick, aging, half-blind from cataracts he could not afford to treat, had unknowingly signed away the very ground beneath his feet, trusting the boy his daughter loved, the boy he had watched grow up hungry in the same red dirt. Do not go anywhere yet. If your chest is tightening the way mine did discovering this, you understand exactly why this story refuses to end quietly. And if you want more stories like this one, hitting subscribe helps more than you know. It costs nothing, and it means everything to us. I confronted Kelechi 3 days later in the compound of his new mansion, beneath the shade of an ironically planted mango tree, a detail so cruel I almost laughed instead of cried. "You stole my father's land," I said. No greeting, no pleasantries, just the accusation sitting bare between us like an open wound. For the first time since his return, I saw something crack in Kelechi's polished, powerful facade. His shoulders sagged, the confident businessman disappeared, and for a moment I saw the barefoot boy from beneath the mango tree, guilt written across features that had grown unfamiliar with age and wealth. "I did not know about the oil, Amara," he said, his voice low. "I swear before God, I did not know when I asked your father to sign those papers. I only wanted to protect the land from local chiefs who were seizing farmland from families who could not pay their so-called development taxes. By the time the oil was discovered, I had already built half my empire on the assumption that land was legally mine. I could have given it back. I should have given it back. But by then," he stopped, unable to finish the sentence, unable to say out loud the ugly truth that by then, greed had rewritten the man he once was.
"And me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What happened to the promise you made me, Kelechi? Was that a lie too from the very beginning? Or did wealth simply teach you how easily promises can be broken when convenient?" His silence was its own confession. But the story was not finished delivering its wounds, because it was in that very moment, Kelechi standing frozen beneath the mango tree, guilt etched across his face, me trembling with a grief too large for my body, that my brother Chidi arrived, breathless, his face carrying the particular horror of a man about to detonate the final bomb in a story already littered with wreckage. "Amara," Chidi said, gripping my arm so tightly it hurt me. "It was me. I was the one who told the local officials about Papa's land years ago. I told them Papa was hiding valuable farmland from the government's development survey. I did not know about the oil either, I swear it. I only wanted the small bride money the officials promised for information. That is how Kelechi found out the land was in danger. That is why he came to Papa in the first place, asking him to sign it over for protection." My own brother. The betrayal did not come from a stranger or even solely from the man who broke my heart. It had roots in my own family, planted by my own blood, watered by desperation and poverty, and the small human weaknesses that make no one in this story entirely innocent. Not Kelechi, not Chidi, not even perhaps myself, for staying silent for years instead of demanding the truth sooner. That night, Papa collapsed. The doctor said it was his lungs finally giving out after years of illness ignored for lack of money, but I have never fully believed that. I believe, in the quiet corners of my heart where logic does not reach, that it was the weight of discovering how his own children, the daughter he raised and the son he trusted, had in their own separate ways contributed to a betrayal that stripped him of the land his ancestors had farmed for generations. I believe grief killed him as much as disease did. We buried Papa Namdi on a grey morning, rain falling softly over Umoibo, as though the sky itself understood the weight of what our family had lost. Not just a man, but the last thread holding together a fragile piece built on secrets. Kelechi came to the funeral. He stood at the back, away from the crowd, dressed simply for once, without the gold watches and tailored suits that usually announced his presence before he entered a room. Adaeze stood beside him, her hand in his, though I noticed, and this detail matters, that they did not look at each other the way people who love each other look at each other. They looked like two people bound by contract, standing together out of obligation rather than affection. After the burial, Kelechi approached me. The village watched, whispering, waiting to see what would happen between the woman scorned and the man who had risen so high above the dust that once covered them both equally. "I will return the land, Amara," he said quietly. "All of it, along with a portion of what the oil earned since discovery. It is not enough. I know it is not enough, but it is what I can offer." I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had once been a barefoot boy full of promises, who had become a powerful stranger, capable of both cruelty and apparently still some fragment of conscience. "Keep your money, Kelechi," I said finally. "Papa is gone. No amount of oil money brings him back. What I needed from you, you gave away the moment you chose silence over truth, wealth over the promise you made beside that stream. You do not owe me land. You owe yourself an honest look at the man wealth turned you into." I want to tell you this story ends with me walking away triumphant, dignity intact, wealth eventually finding its way to me as some kind of poetic justice. But that would be a lie, and I promised you I would not lie in the telling of my own story. The truth is messier than that. Adaeze and I built something unexpected from the wreckage. Not quite sisterhood, not quite friendship, but a fragile understanding between two women who had both been shaped by the same absent father and the same manipulative fate. She eventually left Kelechi, not because of me, but because a marriage built on contracts and hidden debts cannot survive discovery without collapsing under its own dishonesty. Whether Kelechi's empire survived her departure, I genuinely do not know, and I have chosen deliberately not to follow the news of his continued rise or eventual fall. Chidi and I did not speak for almost 2 years after Papa's death. Betrayal, even from blood, leaves scars that do not close simply because time passes. We have, slowly, painfully, begun rebuilding something resembling brotherhood, though I do not know if what was broken can ever be made completely whole again. As for me, I did not become rich. I did not marry a rich man. I did not receive the storybook ending some of you may have been hoping for when you clicked on this story. What I did receive in the wreckage of promises broken and secrets revealed was clarity. I learned that love built on absence and silence is a fragile and dangerous thing. I learned that wealth does not purify a person's character. It simply amplifies whatever was already hiding beneath the surface, good or corrupt. I learned that family can wound you as deeply as any stranger, sometimes more deeply because you never expect the blade to come from hands you trusted. I still live in Umoibo. I farm the land my father left me, not all of it, not the portion Kelechi's empire still quietly claims through documents too complicated and too expensive for a poor woman to contest in city courts, but enough to feed my own small family now. Because yes, eventually, I did marry, not a rich man, not a chief, but a quiet school teacher named Emeka, who never once promised me the moon, and who precisely because of that honesty gave me something steadier than any promise whispered beside a stream. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I still think of Kelechi, not with the burning heartbreak of those early years, but with a strange, distant sadness, the way you might mourn someone who died a long time ago, even though technically he is still walking around somewhere in this world wearing expensive suits, carrying secrets I no longer have the energy to uncover. I do not know if he thinks of me too on his own quiet evenings, wherever those evenings now take place. I do not know if wealth ever truly fills the particular hollow space left behind by a promise broken beneath a mango tree. What I know is that some stories do not end with triumphant justice or perfect closure. Some stories simply end with survival, with a woman standing in the wreckage of everything she believed, choosing day by day to build something honest from what remains. If this story moved you, if you felt every twist the way I lived every twist, remember to subscribe because there are more stories like mine waiting to be told. Stories of love and betrayal, of secrets buried in red dirt and dug up by time, of ordinary people surviving extraordinary heartbreak. My name is Amara. This was my story, and though the boy I loved became a billionaire and forgot me, I did not forget who I was underneath the poverty, the pain, and the promises. That, in the end, was the only inheritance no one could ever take from me.